I'll take it to his home on Odin Street, place he's lived in for 35 years, and proudly place this on his mantle with 5 other previous Academy Awards.
Before his death in 1973, John Ford had already become more myth than man. A one-eyed commander of crews, a cigar-biting poet who turned dust and sunlight into American scripture. Even his peers spoke of him as if he were a continent. Orson Welles once said his favorite directors were the old masters, John Ford, and John Ford. Ford laughed at the reverence, reminding everyone that his job description was simpler. My name's John Ford. I make westerns. Yet behind the stoic facade, Ford was a voracious moviegoer. He devoured silent epics, European comedies, religious dramas, and thrillers. In 1963, he was asked by Cinema magazine to name the films he loved most. His choices were surprising. Only a few of his own pictures surrounded by works of others he admired or envied. Together, they form a portrait of the artist as a movie lover, part historian, part romantic, always in search of truth on film. These are the 7 movies John Ford praised above all others, and what they reveal about the man who built the myth of America one frame at a time. Number 7, The Alamo, 1960.
Well, what do you think, Jim?
I hate to say anything good about that long-winded jackanapes, but he does know the short way to start a war.
A friend's epic. When John Wayne decided to direct and star in The Alamo, few doubted whose shadow loomed over him. For decades, Wayne had been Ford's on-screen alter ego, the stoic embodiment of the frontier code. Now the student was stepping behind the camera, determined to prove he'd learned from the master. Ford visited the set in Texas briefly, cigar in hand, offering curt advice about camera placement and crowd movement. When asked later what he thought of the film, Ford grinned and said, "It's a John Ford picture. He just signed it John Wayne." For Ford, The Alamo wasn't just another Western. It was an act of reverence. He admired its scale, its conviction, and its mythic tone. In Wayne's Davy Crockett, who declares, "Republic, I like the sound of the word," Ford heard the echo of his own cinematic sermons about freedom, duty, and sacrifice. He knew the film romanticized history, but he believed myths had purpose. "When the legend becomes fact," he once said, "print the legend." The Alamo did exactly that. The story's mixture of bravado and melancholy mirrored Ford's own career twilight. The Defender's doom stand felt like an allegory for a fading Hollywood he both loved and resented. Crockett's line, "I give thanks for the time and for the place, the time to live and the place to die," could have been Ford's personal benediction after 50 years of directing. Behind the cannons and flags, he saw a parable about loyalty, friendship, and the price of idealism. He also saw John Wayne, the man who had carried Ford's myths across continents, now making one of his own. That act of creation touched the old director deeply. Placing The Alamo on his favorites list wasn't just about patriotism. It was about mentorship fulfilled. For Ford, watching Wayne direct was like watching a son grow up, even if he'd never say it aloud. Ultimately, Ford loved The Alamo because it celebrated everything he believed cinema should be: bold, emotional, and unashamedly mythic. It wasn't subtle, but neither was he. It was a salute from one storyteller to another, and to the enduring idea that courage, even in defeat, defines a nation. Do you think Ford admired The Alamo more for its patriotic story or for the pride of seeing John Wayne become his own director? And in today's era of revisionist westerns, does this kind of grand myth still inspire, or does it feel like a relic from another age? Number 6, The Song of Bernadette, 1943.
That is correct, in poverty and suffering. Never forget that, my child. For only through suffering can we hope to gain the kingdom of God.
Faith and skepticism. John Ford was no saint. He drank too much, cursed like a sailor, and could terrify an entire film crew with a single glare. Yet beneath the gruff exterior was a man haunted by moral questions. It's no wonder that Henry King's The Song of Bernadette struck a chord with him. The film tells of a poor French girl, Bernadette Suberus, who claims to have seen the Virgin Mary in a grotto near Lourdes. Church authorities doubt her, the government mocks her, and the town whispers she's insane. Still, she never recants. Ford admired stories about ordinary people tested by forces larger than themselves. In The Song of Bernadette, truth and doubt collide not on a battlefield, but within the human soul. When the skeptical Dr. Dozus asks Bernadette to define sin, her answer is disarmingly simple. A sinner is one who loves evil. Ford, who often filmed priests, soldiers, and wanderers wrestling with guilt, must have felt an echo of his own contradictions in those words. What drew him most, though, was Henry King's sincerity. The film never mocks belief, yet it never cheapens it either. Science and faith debate like equals, each searching for proof. One official demands, if science excludes fraud, madness, and miracle, what is left? That paradox fascinated Ford. He wasn't overtly religious, but he revered conviction, the quiet courage to believe in something when the world demands evidence. Visually, The Song of Bernadette is luminous, mist rising in candlelight, faces half-lit with devotion. Ford's own cameraman Greg Tolan once revolutionized cinematography with Citizen Kane, but King's work here offered a different kind of depth, spiritual rather than technical. Ford cherished that balance. He often said movies should move the heart first and the mind second. More personally, Bernadette's humility mirrored the kind of characters Ford loved to champion. The unglamorous heroes, the peasants and wanderers who stand firm without applause. For a man who spent his life turning cowboys into saints and soldiers into poets, The Song of Bernadette was proof that miracles could also wear the face of an ordinary girl. To Ford, the film wasn't propaganda. It was a meditation on endurance. Belief, he thought, didn't have to mean blind faith. It could mean holding one's ground in the face of cynicism. That was a lesson both the church and Hollywood could use. Do you think Ford admired The Song of Bernadette for its spiritual devotion or for its human resilience? And in an age that prizes skepticism, can a film about faith still speak powerfully without preaching? Number 5, Tolerable David, 1921. Innocence and courage. Long before John Ford was mythologizing cowboys, he admired another pioneer of the American countryside, director Henry King. King's Tolerable David tells the simple but timeless story of a boy's first confrontation with evil. David Kinnaman, a shy farmhand from the Virginia hills, wants nothing more than to prove he's man enough. When violence tears his family apart, he's forced to defend their honor with nothing but grit and a slingshot. It's a tale of awakening, of a gentle soul pushed toward courage, and Ford considered it one of the most honest depictions of rural America ever filmed. What likely fascinated Ford wasn't just the plot, but the feeling of place. King's camera lingers on fences, dirt roads, and the rough-hewn texture of wooden porches, the same visual poetry Ford would later bring to Monument Valley. There are no grand heroes here, only ordinary people caught between duty and fear. When David tells his mother, "Ma's right. I'm only tolerable, just tolerable," he sounds like one of Ford's own characters, a man who learns worth through action rather than words. The film's morality is clear, but not simplistic. David doesn't become a hero by killing. He becomes one by finding the will to stand. Ford admired that restraint. He always distrusted flashy violence, preferring stories where bravery blooms quietly. It's easy to see how Tolerable David influenced his own coming-of-age dramas like The Searchers and How Green Was My Valley. Each transforms ordinary landscapes into moral battlegrounds, where courage is measured not by conquest, but by endurance. To Ford, King's film was America before the cynicism, a vision of integrity unspoiled by irony. He once said that in good films, the land itself is a character. Tolerable David lives by that creed. It's earthy, sincere, and profoundly human. A reminder that the frontier isn't just out west, but within every heart learning how to grow up. Can innocence and courage truly coexist? or must one destroy the other? And when you think of coming-of-age stories today, do any still carry that same quiet moral weight that Tolerable David offered more than a century ago? Number 4. The High and the Mighty, 1954. Fear Above the Clouds.
And the one thing we can do right now to help matters, I need a big man. Interested? Fascinated. Grab me around the waist.
John Ford loved stories that put people under pressure. The High and the Mighty did just that, trading deserts and saloons for an airplane cabin 30,000 feet above the Pacific. Directed by William A. Wellman, the film follows a crippled passenger flight and its desperate crew as they limp towards safety. Ford, himself a pilot during the Second World War, admired its mix of technical authenticity and quiet heroism. He called it a Western in the sky, a tale where courage was measured not by a quick draw, but by steady nerves. At the heart of the story is Dan Roman, played by John Wayne in one of his most vulnerable performances. A once great pilot haunted by tragedy, he now serves as co-pilot on commercial flights, carrying the ghosts of his past every time he hears an engine cough. When a mechanical failure threatens everyone aboard, Roman's calm defiance saves them. He steadies frightened passengers with words that could have come straight from Ford's own scripts. "You can't be brave if you're not scared." That line captured everything Ford admired in storytelling. Ordinary people finding grace under pressure. He had always believed true drama came from endurance, not spectacle. In The High and the Mighty, heroism doesn't come with music swelling behind it. It's found in a pilot's trembling hand on a throttle, in a mother holding her child against turbulence, in the exhausted smile of survival. Ford also loved the film's humor. The wisecracking May Holst, a weary showgirl, jokes about her age and failures. There ought to be a home for dames like me. The May Holst home for broken down broads. That kind of sardonic resilience, the refusal to surrender dignity even when fear knocks, was pure Ford territory. It's the same spirit that runs through his soldiers, his ranchers, and his wanderers. When the plane finally touches down and a friend calls Wayne's pilot, "You ancient pelican," Ford reportedly chuckled for days. The film's final mood, relief rather than triumph, felt honest to him. He'd spent his career filming men returning from war, cowboys riding home, settlers facing storms. The landing was the essence of Ford's world. Battered, humbled, but alive. To him, The High and the Mighty wasn't about aviation at all. It was about community forged in fear. A collection of strangers learning empathy at 30,000 feet. That belief in decency, in human connection when everything seems lost, was the invisible signature behind every Ford picture. When danger strikes, do you think true character reveals itself? Or is heroism just luck and circumstance? And if Ford saw The High and the Mighty as a Western in the sky, what kind of frontier do you think we're all still flying toward today? Number 3, Ninotchka, 1939.
You like me just a little bit?
Your general appearance is not distasteful.
Thank you.
The whites of your eyes are clear. Your cornea is excellent.
Laughter behind the Iron Curtain. John Ford had spent a lifetime making the American frontier look heroic, but that didn't mean he was blind to irony. When he saw Ernst Lubitsch's Ninotchka in 1939, he recognized a kindred spirit. Not another cowboy chronicle, but a story that defended freedom with laughter instead of gunfire. Greta Garbo plays a Soviet envoy so serious that her first line is, "Don't make an issue of my womanhood. We're here for work." By the end, love and humor melt her icy resolve. Ford adored that transformation. He understood that even the hardest hearts could thaw. His own films were full of men who pretended indifference until grace crept in. Ninotchka isn't about nations so much as it is about human contradictions. Garbo's deadpan observations, "There are going to be fewer but better Russians," puncture ideology with wit. Ford, who mistrusted all grand theories, admired Lubitsch's refusal to take politics too seriously. He believed comedy was truth in disguise. Where he used landscapes, Lubitsch used drawing rooms. Both turned ordinary spaces into moral stages. In Paris, cafes, hats, and champagne replaced Ford's canyons and whiskey bottles, but the idea is the same. People reveal who they are when they stop performing duty and start being human. Ford also loved Ninotchka because it celebrated craftsmanship. Every camera movement, every pause in dialogue was timed like music. He often told young directors, "If you can't say it with one shot, you don't know what you're saying." Lubitsch could say it with a raised eyebrow. The scene where Garbo finally laughs, after pages of solemn dialogue, was, to Ford, as powerful as a cavalry charge. It was emotional victory achieved through restraint, the very thing he spent his career chasing. There was also personal resonance. By the late 1930s, Ford was negotiating his own uneasy relationship with politics and art. Hollywood was filling with propaganda, Europe was collapsing, and the world demanded filmmakers take sides. Ninotchka offered a different path. It mocked tyranny without slogans, showing that humor could be more subversive than rage. Ford appreciated that courage. He'd always preferred irony to ideology, sentiment to sermon. He knew laughter could sometimes tell the truth that patriotism couldn't. Most of all, he valued Garbo's dignity. Here was a woman neither saint nor seductress, but a person caught between principle and desire, a theme that ran through his own female characters, from Ma Jode to Mary-Kate Danaher. When Garbo smiles for the first time, it feels earned. When she laughs, it feels like salvation. Ford, for all his sternness, would have understood that completely. Ford claimed he loved Ninotchka for its wit without cruelty. Do you think humor is the best weapon against rigid ideology? And could a modern film still use romance and irony to challenge political dogma the way Lubitsch and Garbo did in 1939? Number 2, Three Godfathers, 1948. Outlaws and redemption. If John Ford had a spiritual signature, it was the belief that even the roughest man could find grace. Three Godfathers is his parable of redemption disguised as a Western. The story follows three outlaws, John Wayne, Pedro Armendariz, and Harry Carey Jr., who stumble upon a dying woman in the desert and promise to save her newborn child. Their trek across the burning dunes becomes a modern nativity, with criminals recast as reluctant saints. Ford had filmed the story once before in 1919, but the 1948 version was the one he cherished. Technicolor gave the desert the glow of stained glass, and his older eyes saw something gentler in the material. The men still curse, brawl, and bluff, but under the grit lies devotion. When the marshal tells Wayne's Robert Hightower to "Turn around, Texas, turn around and draw," Wayne just grins. Violence has lost its glamour. Ford turned the chase into an act of penance. Every frame carries Ford's fascination with male friendship, the hard jokes, the quiet loyalty. As the fugitives take turns carrying the baby through the wasteland, the film becomes less about survival than salvation. "I'm sorry I called you a chili-dipping horse thief back there," one says, offering a handshake as precious as water. That blend of humor and tenderness was pure Ford. Rough men revealing hearts they didn't know they had. The film's ending is classic Ford irony. Only one outlaw lives long enough to deliver the infant to safety. When the judge pardons him, he declares, "Court's closed. Bars open." In that single line, Ford fuses tragedy and laughter, reminding audiences that mercy and absurdity often share the same horizon. For him, redemption never came clean. It came dusty, half drunk, and half smiling. Why did Ford rank Three Godfathers among his favorites? Because it captured everything he believed cinema could do. Take myth and make it human. It's a Western that prays without preaching, where holiness arrives wearing spurs. In a career full of gunfighters and wanderers, these three outlaws may have been his truest heroes. Sinners who found grace not in miracles, but in keeping a promise. Why do you think Ford returned to this story after 30 years? Was he seeking to redeem the outlaws or himself? And in a genre built on violence, can redemption really survive without tragedy to test it? Number 1, The Birth of a Nation, 1915, Innovation and Controversy. John Ford never shied away from contradiction, and his admiration for D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation embodies that tension. The film is a towering paradox, technically revolutionary, morally indefensible. Ford, who had a small uncredited role as a hooded Klansman, once acknowledged its influence while condemning its message. He didn't celebrate the racism, he studied the craft. The Birth of a Nation invented the cinematic language every director would later use. Cross-cutting, panoramic battle scenes, the first sweeping sense of scale. Griffith, Ford once said, taught us all to move the camera. To a young filmmaker in 1915, those moving images were a revelation. For the first time, cinema felt grand, like opera. The Civil War battles thundered with real emotion, and Ford learned how to choreograph chaos. The intertitles proclaimed lofty ideals. If in this work we have conveyed to the mind the ravages of war, and Ford took that ambition to heart. His later epics about soldiers, settlers, and outlaws echoed Griffith's vision, but with conscience attached. He transformed Griffith's techniques into empathy rather than propaganda. Still, Ford's inclusion of The Birth of a Nation on his list forces a reckoning. Can art this poisonous still be admired for its invention? Ford believed the answer was yes, but only if one confronts its darkness. He treated it as a cautionary artifact, a reminder that cinema's power could be both beautiful and dangerous. For him, Griffith was a tragic genius, a man who built the cathedral of film but filled it with ghosts. Ford's later masterpiece, The Searchers, is often read as his response. A story about racism, obsession, and redemption told with the tools Griffith invented, but turned toward mercy instead of hate. Through that transformation, Ford paid his uneasy tribute. He could never erase The Birth of a Nation, but he could rewrite its legacy frame by frame. Can we separate a film's artistry from its ideology, or does innovation lose its value when tied to prejudice? If Ford's career was partly shaped by Griffith's genius, does acknowledging that influence help us understand cinema's evolution or its sins? By the end of his life, John Ford had become both myth-maker and myth himself, the last gunslinger of classical Hollywood. Yet his list of favorite films revealed something deeper, a man who loved cinema in all its contradictions. He admired the sacred and the profane, the grand and the humble, the flawed and the beautiful. To Ford, a good film didn't have to be perfect, it had to be alive. Across his 7 choices, you can trace the landscape of his soul. The Birth of a Nation taught him how to move a camera. Tollable David showed him that heroism could live in ordinary faces. The Song of Bernadette reminded him that faith and skepticism can share the same frame. Ninotchka proved that irony can reveal truth. The High and the Mighty reflected courage under pressure, while Three Godfathers embodied redemption through friendship. And The Alamo, made by his own apprentice, showed that even legends must pass the torch. In the end, Ford's list wasn't just a catalog of favorites. It was a self-portrait. Every film he loved echoed something he had already filmed, or wished he could. Together, they formed the grammar of a life devoted to storytelling. As the credits rolled on John Ford's career, he left us one final lesson. Cinema, like the West he immortalized, belongs to no one man. It is a vast country of images and ideals, built by those brave enough to believe in its myths, but wise enough to question them.